Hey, are you in China? Are you looking for something to do April 3rd to 5th? If so, you should check out the 2018 China International Game and Amusement Exhibition. It's being held April 3rd to 5th at the China Import and Export Fair Complex, Area A, halls 1.1 to 8.1. You should check that out if you're interested at ChinaAmusement.com, and on Twitter they're at ChinaAmusement. Again, that's ChinaAmusement.com and at ChinaAmusement. Hi, I'm AJ. Joerg is there. That means that this is, again, Scene World.
Podcast.
Yes. What's happening?
Well, a lot, actually.
I'm just sitting here hanging out on Q-Link, the Commodore users online, I don't know what they called it.
Nobody will see it anyway because this is an audio podcast.
I know, but I can hit keys and make sounds like so that they can pretend.
Okay.
You can see it though, and that's what counts.
Okay.
Here I am in People Connection. Yo, what's up, peeps? There's nobody there, but I just said it anyway.
Okay. All right.
That's
so.
what. Next time we do a streaming thing, we should have like the online chat be on Q-Link. That would be stupid, but
The question is how many people will actually hang out there just for the live stream.
Well, I mean, we can do a Q-Link has an IRC client built into the People Connection, the chat thing. If you just go to IRC and then the room name, it'll connect to an IRC room. So we could actually just tell people go to this IRC room, and then we'd be talking to them on Q-Link, and we could like stream the video of the C64 on there, so it looks so you can see like the Q-Link interface and all that junk.
Interesting idea.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So.
Mm-hmm. In just a minute, we're going to be talking to Chester Kollschen. He's the dude behind Sam's Journey, and one of the big games that have come out. And we may have alluded or hinted in the last podcast that we might be talking to him. And today we are. So that's in a minute. Before that, not too much news this time. But there is some update on the video game high score drama that's happening over at Twin Galaxies.
Exactly, yes. So, first there was this Todd Rogers actually manipulated all scores he ever did.
Right.
So they kicked him out of the database altogether and got rid of all his scores.
Has he said anything about this since it happened?
Yeah, well, I'm not a pro gamer anymore. My life doesn't depend on it anymore, so who cares? I know that I did the scores, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then the thing is, then there was like Billy Mitchell being accused of making his high score in Donkey Kong based on a MAME emulator,
right,
instead of real hardware. So the thing is, we both interviewed Billy Mitchell and also Richie, the king of arcades, Knuckles, and so the thing is, actually, I spoke to Richie Knuckles and on the phone, and he told me that this cannot be true because Billy Mitchell is not only a role he plays, but he really has no idea about electronics, emulators whatsoever. So It simply cannot be that this was being achieved by using MAME. So I was actually talking to Richie, and in his opinion, it is possible that there are different actings on the original Donkey Kong board. Despite it's an original, it can still be that some timings are different and whatsoever.
Right, because what I saw from the post where they were discussing the why they think it was a cheat or why it wasn't an original game, I guess how the level initially displays things don't pop on screen all at once. It draws the platforms, it draws the sprites for whatever, it draws this stuff, and there's a specific order and speed that it goes at. And when you compare an original game to the way that a MAME implementation would do it compared to whatever else, they all do it slightly differently. And that's what they were basing the accusation that he wasn't using actual hardware. But here's another question, though, is that aside from just the fact that it redraws slightly differently, what's the deal? What's the big deal? Say he did use MAME, he did use an emulator, and he got a high score. He's still playing the game. It's not like he's speeding it up or slowing it down so he can do better. It's still the game. It's just right. Am I wrong about that?
You're a bit wrong about that. In that case, that Twin Galaxies has separated scores for MAME and non-MAME. So regional arcade.
Okay.
That's the main big deal here. So he says it could be just depending on the revision of the board or whatever that screen he uses or whatever, and that makes a different drawing. So what is Richie Knuckles actually about to do is next week he wants to actually pin down the exact arcade that Billy Mitchell did the score on.
Okay.
And then he wants to analyze it.
Okay.
He stressed the fact during our phone call and on Facebook on his personal Facebook page that he does not declare himself to be the big expert and he knows everything about Donkey Kong or arcades, but he thinks that's a possibility, and he doesn't see any chance that Billy Mitchell would have gained the knowledge by himself how to fire up MAME and play Donkey Kong.
A good person to ask about that would be Todd Tuckey from TNT Amusements, because he seems to know a lot of stuff about the different versions of each arcade that came out, and if he might know that this version 3 from whenever of Donkey Kong draws it this certain way or something like that, because there's. But again, okay, say someone took a MAME implementation and made a cabinet that plays Donkey Kong. He's still again. Why would that make a difference whether it's on real hardware or not?
Because Donkey Kong plays totally different, and not only by the way it draws, but also how fast you can react, how fast you can control the characters using keyboard emulation or real arcade sticks.
Okay.
So that's also a matter of implementation, and that's the big deal here. So actually, Rich Knuckles is in the process of trying to pin down the exact arcade. Okay. Let's see if that is going to happen.
Yeah.
Because
say someone did build a cabinet that houses a MAME implementation, it would be entirely possible that maybe Billy Mitchell used it without even knowing he was using a MAME emulator version, right? That's
could be.
It's just I don't know. It seems to me that if you played the game, even if you're not, the other dude basically manipulated things and made up his scores. Like they weren't possible. But if you still played through it, you still got the score. You still did, you still played the thing. So to me, I don't feel like it should be that big of a deal whether it's on original hardware. If you used an emulator and then used that emulator's options to cheat, to slow down the playing so that you can react better, or
assist,
right, or to pause it and go take a leak or something. That's a different story. But if you're playing it straight through, maybe there's minor differences to the average player. Those differences would be insignificant and not even noticeable.
Well, but we are talking here about professional
Wow.
e-gaming, so that's the difference here. Anyway, the other thing that was pointed out is also that the people who did executions and did
what?
dispute
People
the accusations
Oh,
and did dispute the record
yeah.
were young people, and maybe people of certain ages may not know exactly how the arcades work. That's another thing that was pointed out and brought up.
Okay.
I mean, I see it myself. A lot of knowledge nowadays is getting lost because the new generation simply doesn't know. But of course, that doesn't mean that if you are young and you are digging your way into retro or arcades, that you're not capable of getting it all. But maybe. Yeah. The other thing that always also surprised me, Todd Rogers, for example, in that case, it was also that David Crane was asked, the co-founder of Activision and the creator of the game. And he said himself, despite the perfect run by a tool assistant playing was 3 seconds longer than what Todd Rogers achieved, he still thinks it's possible. So it's for me, it's a bit surprising that all those opinions by people who are around in this video game and arcade business since 20, 30, 40 years are quickly withdrawn. Like, well, he might be an expert, but still not valid anyway.
Well,
that's I don't know. That's
you're talking about
surprising.
the founder of Activision saying that maybe his assertion is incorrect or something. But here's the thing: as a coder, as a guy that can, if I code a game, I don't necessarily know what the top score would be. If I made a racing game, I don't know what the best you could do is, because as a coder, you're mostly making sure it works. And okay, so it works, and maybe someone can get a better score than what you can. You might be good at coding it, but not great at playing it.
Okay. So, what is your opinion? Do you really think this cheating drama is a thing?
I think
these disputes are just making up by people who have no idea what they are talking about?
I think that there's obviously going to be some cheating amongst some stuff, like the Todd Rogers thing. All right, maybe he did. He doesn't seem to be worried about disputing it or anything, which kind of makes you question whether he I don't know if he came out and said that he didn't do it or whatever, but yeah, no, I definitely think there is a degree of cheating because people want to have the high score. And some people will do what they got to do to get it. I don't know that Billy Mitchell would be one of those guys. It doesn't seem like he doesn't strike me as the kind that would, because his thing isn't. I don't know. Having a high score is okay, but it's not. It's more just like, look how good I am at it, and just the name draws from that. You don't need the score, but I still don't think it's that big of a deal to worry about the platform. Maybe it's good to have your separate categories, your main high scores, and then your other high scores and whatnot. So, and I also think that a lot of the people that are complaining and are posting these analysis, sometimes they can be dudes that just want to shake things up, want to be a pedant about it. That's two podcasts in a row I've used that word.
Anyway, it's also a fact that Brad Weiss, the collector, actually sold his personally signed Traxxer's copy from the VCS of Traxxer, signed by Todd Rogers, for $800 on eBay.
Jeez, that's a lot of money for the autograph of a guy I don't know, who I've never heard of before.
Well, he's the first professional league gamer. He actually was paid for making records and stuff.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
Maybe it would be a good guest to talk to when all this thing has
No, have him
cooled
on
down.
now before it's cooled down. While all this stuff is still simmering. Yeah, no, that would be great to have him on now because then we could dive into it. Then we could get, I would like that perspective of what he thinks of this.
I mean, I've spoken to Billy Mitchell couple of times. I mean, I know Richie Knuckles. We know their thing,
right?
But Todd Rogers, we never spoke to.
We also know that Billy Mitchell and Richie Knuckles are buddies. So your buddy gets accused of cheating, you're going to go out on a limb to try to defend him.
Yeah, but Richie Knuckles tries to see it more from the technical standpoint, and he doesn't see a possibility how Billy Mitchell, who has no idea about electronics and computers and emulators, can gain this knowledge and cheat.
Well, again, but the pictures that they showed of it he was using a console, or not a console, but a cabinet. He was on an arcade cabinet, and so it could have been a MAME implementation within a cabinet, because it's easier to do that a lot of times than it is to go and find an old board and refurbish it and get it to work again.
Maybe he didn't open it up and checked it out.
He probably didn't. I mean, and even if he did, the dude doesn't know anything about electronics or any of that stuff, so what would it tell him? I mean, we're just talking about how technologically inept he is, and he opens the cabinet, it's wires and chips and stuff. That means nothing to him.
Yeah. Well, we will see how this turns out.
Yeah.
So the other news is I got my analog Super NT, and that is something we mentioned that a couple of podcasts before. That was actually interesting because going back to the interview I did at the former Smith-Only Museum with Chris Hülsbeck, Super NT from Analog is a Super NES clone that's sells for $189, and it's so special because it contains the director's cut of Turrican. And that is special because what happened originally is that when the game was designed, it was too big for the memory on the PCBs for the Super Nintendo cartridges. So actually what they did is they removed all that stuff, So, and so Analog actually got the license from Factor 5 to exclusively release the director's cut on their console, built in the ROM.
Okay.
So when you boot up the machine, you can actually select Turrican 2 or Turrican director's cut.
Oh, okay.
Or you can start games from an SD card. It has a SD slot on it.
Cool.
ROMs, or you can actually plug in your cartridges. And I did a test with it. There was this Unholy Night Super NES game.
Yes.
The first game being released after 19 years of no new commercially released SNES game. Yeah. SNES. And the console can be switched between NTSC and PAL. And if I put it on this default, which is NTSC because it's an American company, the game doesn't even run.
Wah, wah.
Yeah. So if I put it on PAL, the game runs and you can play it, but sometimes the game crashes or the player sprites are just disappearing during gameplay, which means you cannot see who you are knocking over or where a character is. And at this point, the game crashes again. So it seems it's like okay compatible to already existing games, but it's not compatible very much to this new Unholy Night game, which is quite an unfortunate thing because what probably a lot of people would do is they get this latest game and the latest console, and then they figure out they don't fit together.
Yeah.
So that's actually my experience with the Super MT. And a lot of people in the retro gaming area were pretty rude and pretty disappointed by Mr. Eckbrecht, and to have given the license to them rather than releasing the game to the community for free.
Right.
Right. So that's actually, I bought it, and it's good. The good thing here is they enclosed a Super NES cartridge box with it.
Speaking of reproductions, we have the C64 Mini has a release date now.
March 29th.
March 29, 2018. So in a month from, 2 months from now, but a month and a half. But soon, it'll be out in stores. You can get one.
Well, will you get one? That means you don't know.
I have a real C64, so I don't know I have a use for it, really, honestly. Because again, I can just, I can turn this one on.
Or you can wait for the Pro version that is coming out.
Well, but
that
even that,
have a full-featured.
Even that, though, with the full keyboard and all that stuff, I have a C64. So if this gave me some capabilities that this doesn't, maybe built-in super CPU or something like that, that would be something that would.
You can use Wise for the super CPU.
It doesn't really work that well. I've tried it.
Well, Metal Dust works on it so far.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I tried a couple of demos and they weren't very thrilled. So,
okay. Well, it's still an alpha feature from what I know, right?
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, if I didn't have one, if I didn't have a machine and just wanted something to go and play games with, then yeah,
you would get a DTV and modify it.
Well, no, I think this is better than the DTV, but
that will be to be seen.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. There's a lot of vitriol about it. I mean, I see a lot of people in the C64 groups won't even discuss it. It's like a banned topic, which
I know.
Which surprises me.
Mention it, and then you get banned.
Yeah, which surprises me because it's something that's actually being done, and they all love the 64 Reloaded, and they love the 64 Ultimate, which isn't even out yet, and
they like the DTV. Everybody loves the DTV.
Right, but this thing is getting... And this is a thing that's actually going to be produced. It's actually... There's a date on it. It's I don't see the... It's not a Vega Plus.
Well, of course, I cannot talk about the Ultimate 64 yet because it's not released yet.
Right.
I only did pre-order it. So I will be able to talk about it when I have it, but the C64 Reloaded Mark II is very good.
Right. Hands
down, it's very good, and it's making everything correct that the first rendition of the machine made wrong, like being incompatible with the Messiah cartridge, which I didn't think was a big deal because you can get a €10 or 10 or €5 USB port reset button, and then the problem is solved.
Yeah.
So it's but anyway, it's still a very good thing. So people can get this if they want to have a new C64 instead of thing. Well, the thing is with the DTV, why people loved it is mainly because seeing people were involved with this.
Right.
Adrian Gonzalez and Robin Harpen did the software. Jerry Ellsworth did the hardware. And Darren Milburn, nobody ever heard of. But now Darren Milburn is doing this thing, and he promised a little game console version that won't be coming out. Instead it's a little Pred bin replica with non-working keyboard, and people got pissed about that because they wanted to have one they can carry around, a little game console.
Yeah.
But then
you mean like a handheld?
Yeah, but then of course you can get a handheld like a Dingo Digital. That is a handheld emulator and run a C64
You can
emulation on it.
run Vice on a freaking Android phone, for God's sake.
I know. But of course, it's convenient if you have a real C64 that's a handheld thing. The portable handheld thing.
Yeah.
We will see. In the end, it will be released and probably will be a lot better than people are anticipated would be. Even without Cherry Ellsworth and even without Adrian Gonzalez and without Robin Harper. Still, without the scene guys, it still should be possible.
Yeah.
Because, you have FPGA, and we talked about this a lot of times, there's this FPGA SID coming out, and now everybody's under pressure that SID emulation has to be not emulated, but really perfect to the original chip. So that will be very interesting to see. Of course, I can imagine that it will more focus on the 8580 because it's easier to emulate than the 6581, which
Right.
is the which
you
has
don't have
this.
to worry about the filters and junk.
Yep. Well, of course there are filters, but they're not as remarkable as the old version.
Yeah,
So
they're
we will
different.
see. We will see if they go the easy path, or if Darren Mailbird actually got developers that really put so much power and enthusiasm into it that this machine will be close to perfect, and then everybody will shut up and say, okay, was better than I thought it would be, hands down.
Yeah.
No question about it. So we spoke a lot about emulation and FPGA rendering and all that stuff. Oh my god.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to Flexi Laser. They are a German company. I just got this case, and listeners can't see it, but you can. This is a case for my ACA 500.
I know, yeah.
This is a solidly well-built acrylic case.
And actually, I'm planning on ordering from them in a few days.
Oh, yeah?
There's this Pratt bin case.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, right. I've seen that.
Yeah, because the see-through one, people want like $250 for it.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous,
Yep.
on eBay. So, and I would like to have a Pratt bin board with an ultimate SwinSit, because it has LEDs on it and it's really shiny and colorful when it's working.
Right.
And then having this plexi thing put into it, that would really be a nice colorful show when the SID chip is active.
Yeah.
And that is why I'm planning to buy from them as well.
Cool. Yeah, they make good stuff. It's Michael Schoen, I think. Is that how you say it? Sean?
Michael Schön.
Schoen.
Schön.
Yeah,
like Schönfeld.
Yeah, okay. So it's Michael
Pretty.
Schoen. Yeah.
Pretty it means.
You can check it out at www.plexilaser.de. And I heartily recommend it. Make good stuff.
Right.
So that's all I got.
Me too.
Okay. Well,
That was pretty easy. Oh my god.
yeah, so we've got so Chester Kollschen is waiting over there for us to finish up here and get to him. So let's go and do that now.
Yeah, the Knights of Bytes.
Yes.
So, it took 10 years till I finally have an interview with Chester Kollschen. Oh my god. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
So, you are pretty much known for doing a lot of games. Actually, C64 Wiki says you're one of the few that actually started developing for the C64 in '97 when it was not worth it anymore from the commercial side.
Yeah, well,
the
Commodore. Yeah, I know. Of course, I know. The Commodore 64. I don't know when were his heydays over. I think in the mid '90s already.
I think
the beginning,
94. I guess 94 was the last one with Lemmings. That was actually
it was the last one with Lemmings, but I'm sure it had been declining long before that, as far as the amount of money you could make off of software sales, because you had lots of. I mean, the C64 was rife with piracy, so I think we lost profitability disappeared a lot sooner than it did with some other things like the NES and so on.
Well, that's true. But the NES, I love the NES, but that's a completely different subject, by the way. But profitability is one thing, but things have changed, interestingly, from back then until today. Mm-hmm. So 10 years have passed and the situation has amazingly changed.
Let's talk a bit about how you actually started. I mean, how did it start that you got a C64 and that you decided you code games for hobby, despite the heydays were over yet?
Yeah, well, what was it? I think I was not even 10 years old when in a local toy store I saw in the window a thing that could display animation on a TV screen, and you could even influence what was happening there using buttons. And I was so fascinated by that. And I was asking the clerk at the store, well, what does it cost? And okay, I haven't even been 10 years old, and the amount of money that he told me was quite unachievable for a young boy. But I really wanted to have something like that. So I started to save money. I really started saving money when I was 10 years old for whatever, for this thing called computer or video game or whatever. And it was a long way to go, actually. And I think the Commodore 64 was introduced in Germany back in, 82 maybe?
Actually, 83. It took a year to come to Europe from the US. Yeah,
it was introduced. I remember very well for 1,300 German Deutsche Marks, and that was hell of a lot of money. I mean, yes. Hell of a lot of money. So I had to save some years more. But, price was dropping, and there was a point in time when the price and the money I saved met in the middle. And then I think at the age of 10 or 11, I finally bought a C64. Wow. It could have been any other computer, but the C64 was at that time that new thing. So it had to be a C64, but the money I saved wasn't sufficient for a C64 with a floppy disk drive. So I had to deal with the tape first. What is it called? The tape deck. And,
data set.
Data set. Yeah, right. And better than nothing, of course. But the disk drive should be a thing some years later to buy.
Well, you could have moved to UK, because in Britain the dataset was more common than the disk drive because of the big difference in price compared to disk games.
Yeah, I know. I have been asked a lot just lately, about my brand new game, whether there is a tape option. And most of the people who asked that were, no wonder, UK guys. But I think, what was it? Was it the Amstrad or the Spectrum? I don't know really the term, but you could, as I remember, plug a real cassette recorder to this computer. You didn't even have to buy a certain special thingy. Right. Yeah. And I think that's what made it quite popular.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, people have kind of a real nostalgic reverence for the tape loaders, which blows my mind because I started out with a disk drive and I didn't get a data set until years later when it was in amongst a lot of other stuff that I got, an old used thing, and they had a couple of games on cassette, and I remember trying them and being like, God, why would anyone do this? Like, why would you torture yourself with watching this thing load for 45 minutes?
Well, it was actually between 10 and 12.
The thing is, I'm not the big fan of the data set or tape in general, because the older you get, the less time you have. And so it's quite, I don't know. A disk drive is more logical than a tape deck, but people developed quite interesting loading systems for the tape. And as far as I understood, some guy told me what's so great about tapes, and he said it's not the game itself. It could have been loaded from disk as well, but some loading systems perform a real kind of show while loading. There is this picture coming up, and then there are scroll text with advertisement for the next products or some stuff. And maybe today, where the time is so fast, people use the tape to decelerate life a bit, to get ready for the game, to get into the mood, make coffee, whatever.
Yeah.
Play Sam's Journey on the emulator instead.
Yeah.
While you wait
but I did my first programming attempts using the dataset, but I have so often lost my work due to, let's say, errors in the usage of the dataset. You mean rewinding or fast forwarding, noting numbers on a piece of paper, losing this piece of paper, and so losing work. It was quite kind of frustrating, and the disk drive, which I don't know, came 2 years later for me, was kind of a revelation, I think. Yeah, helped a lot.
So, and what made you decide to code games? I think your first commercial game was Ice Guys, or am I mistaken? 97?
If you don't count these online, not online, what were they called? Disc magazines, where you could send in stuff, which could have been published. If you don't count that, then yes, Ice Guys would have been my first commercial product in, I don't know, 94? I think 94. It's been released by myself, actually, and later on published by Protovision, where it is still available today, interestingly, as a, I don't know, €1 download thingy.
Interestingly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember it being released in 97, and with the C64 wiki says the same, actually.
Well, I'm not that very good with numbers, I admit, and I know I had my exams at school, and when I was developing Ice Guys, so that was 95. But maybe the process of publishing was, of course, later after that, and I know you were one of my first customers, because it was back in a time where I put an ad into a printed newspaper that was about computer systems, and I think you wrote me a letter. And
I did, yes. In April 98, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, actually, and payments were done putting checks into an envelope and sending it.
Cross checks, exactly.
Yeah. And shipping was done with copying discs and sending them over and stuff.
Yes, and I remember your answer. I remember your answer. You said, "I'm very humbled by your interest, but unfortunately, I only released 2 games so far, and that was Bomb Mania and Ice Guys."
Yeah. They were the products for that people know and recognize me, because, as you said, they were the commercial ones. I mean, there was stuff before not worth mentioning at all. So let's talk about everything beginning with Ice Guys.
Nice. Yes. But you had some up and downs, actually. I mean, there was a thing with Terrakin 3 that wasn't very nice going, because the preview was stolen on a disk. And I think it was actually stolen from you, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it was not stolen from me, but the thing is, there have been these Turrican game series, which actually started on the C64. It was later continued on the Commodore Amiga and then ported to consoles. But the series started on C64, and after Turrican 3, which was, I think, now it's my bad memory for numbers again, in the beginning of the 90s, released for the C64.
1990, I guess.
And after that, there was kind of a break from all Turrican kinds of games, because Mr. Manfred Trenz ceased his C64 work completely, and no one else ever did a Turrican-like game again. And well, at least in the PAL zone, it was a very popular series, and people, well, wished there would be another game. And well, the Stefan, whom I'm working with, he was always, it was always his wish to continue the series in an unofficial way, of course.
You mean Stefan Gutsch?
Right.
Yeah.
The same Stefan who made the graphics for Sam's Journey. I'm working with Stefan for a very long time now, and actually we've met because we both wanted to make a Turrican style game. That was actually the inception of our collaboration.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this Turrican was actually quite technically not as good as we wanted it to be, but this has something to do with the skill set at that time. And when it leaked, it was in a shape where it, let's say, well, the internal name for the game was Turrican 3. So when the intellectual property owner of the real Turrican series got aware of this preview, that was not a good thing. And combined with the fact that it's technically not what we wanted it to be, we axed it, finally.
I see. But there is a happy ending there, because AEG actually from Smash Designs released another Turrican 3 in 2004. So at least the fans got their Turrican 3, but from another group.
Yes, and it was quite an endeavor for the AEG and his team to get this one done, because it had to be done in his spare time. But he was actually connected with some of the original intellectual property owners. So that was, I think, legally okay. And that's even a good point.
Was that the reason why it took a lot of time until 2005, where you finally continued with Metal Dust? That you decided, okay, I'm done with this because my experience with Turrican 3 was so bad?
You mean I was done with anything concerning the C64 and stuff?
I don't know. I'm just asking because I see in your history you are taking a lot of breaks, you know? Sam's Journey was also taking another 12 years from the last game you did. So you always have big breaks in your game development.
This is right, yeah. Happily, these are breaks, and not that I would need 12 years to make a game also. No, it's the Turrican 3 project was kind of a hobby project. It was done in the time where you have another job and you do your C64 stuff in your spare time. So Ice Guys and Bomania, as I said, were done in the after school and in the before job time, you know, in this limbo in between. So you can't really tell if it's a hobby or kind of a self-employment, because it's more like the work of an artist. You know, you do this work, and when it's done, you try to monetize it or publish it, or and it doesn't even matter if you do it as your full-time job or in your spare time. Doesn't really matter. And the Turrican 3 was axed, and now you're talking about Metal Dust. Metal Dust was interestingly also a project started by Stefan Gutsch, but he was the coder of Metal Dust. But he is not really a coder. He's more the graphician. So, and he coded this stuff because there was no one else who would code it at that time.
Yeah, it's a really kind of a niche game because it's super CPU based. So you need this real rare piece of hardware to even play the game.
Well, it wasn't rare back in the day because it was still available.
It was still pretty rare, even when they were making them. Not too many people had those.
Well,
I think the number of super CPUs that have actually been sold is, as far as I know, unknown. I mean, the serial numbers have 4 digits, but you don't know whether they start counting from 0 or from 100. This piece of hardware was actually very rare, and the price was not. I mean, it was not just an acceleration card. It was so much more, but most people, couldn't use it at its full amount of power. They just use it as an accelerator card. And it has been quite expensive for just an accelerator card.
I know. I've saved for over half a year as a kid when I was 16, because it did cost, with the Super RAM card and 60 megabyte of RAM, it did cost 500 German marks.
See, and me being the idiot that I am, when it was still being sold, I was like, hell with that noise. I'll wait, 10 or 15 years to when people are selling it, when they get old and no one cares about it anymore. Now they're like $3,000.
Yeah, on eBay. Yeah. but we have now other pieces of hardware, actually quite new. For example, the Turbo Chameleon, which is compared to a super CPU quite cheap.
Will Metal Dust work with that?
No.
Well.
But the manufacturer of the Turbo Chameleon have asked me, I don't know how many times, if there might be a way for me to,
Yes, please. Let's put you and Jens together.
Yeah. Why don't we ask Jens if there's a way to have the Turbo Chameleon emulate the super CPU?
No, that might be easier. This won't happen. But what might happen? What might be more probable is to make another Metal Dust for not the super CPU. Instead of the super CPU and the Chameleon emulating the super CPU. This wouldn't work. The Chameleon, as far as I know, isn't strong enough for that. And also, you have to emulate a different kind of CPU because it's a 16-bit CPU. It has a very much larger address bus and could address much more memory, which, by the way, has to be in the Chameleon, but is not. So there are some problems arising here. And Metal Dust is, how old is it now? We are back to numbers, I think.
2005.
5. Oh, good. I guessed 4, but it's more than 10 years ago. It's more than a decade. So, and looking at Metal Dust today, I was proud on releasing Metal Dust back then, not because it's a particularly awesome super shoot 'em up, but because it was a really difficult project and we finally managed to get it done. Right.
Well, it's the reason I've got a 1581 drive. So
that's the reason.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Most people would have said GEOS would have been my reason, but okay.
Well, I have been a GEOS user too, so I used it for both, so no problem.
That's good. Were you able to play Metal Dust, actually? I mean, I'm good at it.
No, I'm bad at games. I wanted it so badly, I didn't care.
Yeah.
Didn't care. Yeah. It's not only because of Welle Erdball. It's not only because of the music. So, right.
But he's bad at most games I've seen him play. So it's probably nothing against the game itself.
Racing games I'm good at racing games.
I beg to differ, sir. Pit stop too.
But AJ said something about a niche, and I think Metal Dust is still up to today, the only game developed for the Super CPU. So there has never been another game especially made for it. And if you ask me today whether it was a good idea to even make it, I would say no, of course not. Because the original plan was another one. It was to make the Super CPU more popular, actually, because I know in the NTSC zone, I'm not sure, but I think in its original country where it was manufactured, the main target audience for the Super CPU wasn't really the gamers, but the GEOS users,
Right.
I think.
Right.
The
That
Accelerate.
was in the 90s, late 80s, I guess, when that came out. That was in a lot of the things that you'd read here in the U.S., it was really touted as something that would help you get a couple more years out of your C64 equipment, because the people here, you had like some diehards. They did not want to leave this. They had a lot of stuff invested, drives and software and everything, and so this let you squeeze a little bit more blood out of that turnip.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm aware of all these Commodore user clubs over in America who are still meeting today, actually. And I see when they post pictures, and I see quite some communities discussing stuff. And I think their monthly or annual or quarterly club magazine is still being printed using GeoPublish. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's amazing, actually. But in Europe, or the GEOS has never been this popular because it has always been, I don't know, the C64 was a gaming machine over here, and the demo scene has picked it up. And, it's a technical thing. You have some more, possibilities on a PAL machine, interesting for game developers and demo developers.
Despite that, you did your own operating system.
Well, I started to, but this was more an academical thing, because at that time I was studying information technology, and one subject on the schedule was, of course, operating systems. And at that time, we were still active on the C64, and the Super CPU was up at that time. And you 1 + 1, and you are at, hey, let's make an operating system. But it's the same thing as if you release a new platform today and you have an app store and there are no apps. You have no apps, you lose. And so releasing an operating system without a killer app or an app at all, it's actually a bad idea. And no one really wanted to do something like porting GeoPublish or GeoWrite or, you name it, to a new operating system. Although it would have been cool, because, I mean, the Super CPU has powers that GEOS hasn't even used, because it had to be backward compatible to the old stuff. It was 8-bit code. It just, I don't know, benefited mainly from, I think, the RAM for caching stuff. But I mean, all the applications had still been the old 8-bit stuff, just a bit faster. Well. But it turned out an operating system is a way too huge project if you have a small team. And so this one got axed as well at a certain point of time.
Too bad.
We had some interesting things running. Graphical user interface featuring multi-threaded animations. That was fun stuff. But, this is fun, not productivity. And your potential customers for an operating system would want to not watch animations. They would want to, publish their monthly club magazine. So it would have been a very long way to publishing the club magazine using our operating system.
On the other hand, you had more success, as you said in another interview, than you expected with the 4-player games adapter.
Yeah, this is this is an interesting thing. Bombmania was my second commercial game, and I believe you are an early customer of that one too.
Yes, I got the combo version.
If anyone's an early customer, it's always Joerg.
It's always Joerg.
Yeah, he's always the first one in line.
Has Bombmania ever been popular in the US?
Yes.
Yes. It is?
Yes.
Oh, great. But there first had to be an NTSC version of it, and I think when I created Bombmania, it has, of course, always been a PAL thing, but when it was published via Protovision, then the NTSC support was added. It was a good thing. And the adapter you were talking about, well, I have met a friend who has just got for Christmas this thingy on the Super Nintendo called Bomberman with a 4-player.
Yeah, the 4-score.
Yeah.
4-score is it called? Yeah.
4-score, right? And he was, and I didn't even know Bomberman. I missed Dynablast on the Amiga completely.
Wow.
On the C64, there haven't been many good clones, I think, and I played with the 4-player adapter. I don't know whether I really liked the concept of Bombmania, but playing it with 4 people at the same time, that was actually the source of joy, happiness, and fun. And so I thought, hey, wow, we need a 4-player adapter for the C64. And I'm not good at soldering or creating hardware stuff, but I I put together a, let's say, prototype. Well, I call it prototype. Jens Schönfeld would call it junk, but I mean...
Okay.
The hot glue solder method? Yeah, I know all about that.
Well, yeah, I used to put the jacks where you afterwards plug the joysticks in. The jacks were screwed into a case where a video cassette was originally inside, and the cables were, oh no. Well, it worked. That's the important bit. And the what is it? The scheme, the electrical the scheme. Is it called scheme?
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah.
I made a drawing of the scheme and had some other guy do the soldering. And I made a Bomberman clone in very little days because someone told me, hey, there's a new magazine here in Europe and there is the first issue. Wouldn't it be great if Bombmania was part of it? I said, okay, when's what is it called? When the staff at the newspaper says, okay, all articles have to be here at deadline, right? When's deadline? Yeah, well, in 10 days. Yeah, okay. And that's why Bombmania up to today is a bit quirky, but...
Didn't notice that. Didn't notice.
And but this is how we made this adapter popular. And because the schemes were open, some people even built their own. And one guy who picked it up was Jens Schönfeld and made it a professional version. And I think I'm now the proud owner of a Jens Schönfeld edition of
of your own thing.
Okay. I still have the only and original bought from Megacom back in the day. From Wolfgang Grimm.
Yes.
The coder of Mega Patch, the patch for GEOS. Oh my god. Yeah.
Okay. I think then your 4-player adapter is this tiny black box.
No, it's a red circuit board.
Okay. So there seem to be more editions than I know.
You see.
Well, great. But I was lucky, not lucky. I was happy or glad that other people picked this up, and there have been other adapters for 4 players, but I think that one became quite the de facto standard, and many games have been adapted, even those who weren't originally for 3 people. I think someone
International Karate.
McLean's International Karate. Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. There have always been 3 fighters on screen, but That was quite fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like the IDE adapter, IDE 64, where there was a time where every game was patched for IDE 64, and I guess it was the same with your 4-player adapter. Many games were patched for this adapter, you know. Yeah, and some actually modified Bomb Mania for using keyboard instead.
But this is, this is kind of downgrading, I think. But I mean, it could have been the problem that joysticks are not that easy to come by in the last 10 years. I mean, people like Jens Schönfeld now produce a brand new Competition Pro joystick. But there have been times when your joystick broke, you had a problem because there have no replacements available. And maybe that's where you say, hey, let's use the keyboard instead.
Oh, man. I think joysticks are one of those things that will just be... Because we can adapt, you know, you can take an Atari joystick or, you know, a Sega Master System thing. Anything that's got that 9-pin plug and pretty much convert that. I think that's one of those things that we're going to have forever. After we're all dead and gone and these machines are all dead and gone, there's going to be an Atari joystick somewhere.
And it's playing Bomb Mania on the 64, but I guess your first game that was actually released in a big package up to the nowadays standards was actually, well, I mean, we could say Metal Dust was the first one that was professionally released with a big case and so on. But that wasn't a 1541 release, so that maybe doesn't count. I don't know.
I think it still counts. I mean, it was for a Commodore 8-bit system, even if it had enhancements, and even if it was on a 1581 disc, it's still a release that was professional and.
Yeah. Well, this subject has been discussed in a very controversial way, actually, because whether it was a C64 release or not was, as I said, a subject of very, very. It was kind of a war instead. Some people say no. It may look like a C64 and it may sound like a C64, but it doesn't feel like a C64 anymore. And for those people, well, it's not my view of things, but I can on video game consoles, no one ever asks if there have been any additional hardware on the cartridge. You know, I've always been a big fan of the Nintendo consoles like NES and Super Nintendo, and I mean I know there have been actually a lot of additional hardware on the cartridges to make the games work. And you can argue whether the Super CPU is kind of a little additional hardware that, but well, it may have put people off, and the price maybe was also an aspect of that.
Didn't stop me.
Well, as far as being an actual release for it, I mean, no one questions. I've got stuff that won't run on a stock Amiga 500 that'll run on one that's got extra memory or slightly faster processor and all that stuff, and no one argues that that's just an Amiga game. You know, and with the C64, sure, basically the C64 is a keyboard for this box that's plugged into the back of it now, but it's still a C64 basically.
Yeah, I don't get this point either. I mean, on the C64, there seems to be an unwritten law that you may not at all modify or extend your C64. On the other hand, I see many breadboxes with a lot of switches built in and buttons and stuff and alternative kernel ROMs and whatever. And but this is I don't know where's the threshold where it's called cheating. I don't know.
I'm gonna bring in the Jeep analogy again, in that everyone that has a Jeep, they always do things to it. It's never like it came out of the factory like it. They have to put stupid lights on it or change the tires or whatever. Same thing with the C64. Everyone does their own little thing to it. None of them are like they came out of the factory like that, because they've put little switches in, or they've added a Jiffy DOS or whatever. None of them are stock anymore.
I have some stock ones,
but they're not going to be stock for a while after you get done with them.
Well, I will keep them stock, but I know what you mean. Yeah. I also have modified one. I have a whole collection.
The ones that you use are the modified ones.
No. Actually, I'm using a retro replay. That's good enough for me, actually.
But again, now you're modifying it because that is not a ROM that came with the original.
But it's not an internal. It's not an internal.
Doesn't matter. The Super CPU is an internal either.
Yeah, but I don't add switches. I don't add switches to my machine.
Wow. So as you can see, two people are enough to have this kind of debate, yeah. And now imagine the entire community.
Mm-hmm. But now going to them German, didn't it hurt you that people in the NTSC world were arguing? They're like, I can do it better. My solution wouldn't require a RAM expansion unit.
Oh, you're talking about Sam's Journey.
Yeah. Now we should talk about Sam's Journey.
Armchair coders. They're like, yeah, I could have done that better. Then do it.
Yeah, armchair coders. Nice term, yeah. Well, thing is, when we started with Sam's Journey, or when we had the initial idea and did some brainstorming stuff and tried out the first little stuff, we haven't even thought about the NTSC, because we weren't even sure that we would make it a big product, actually. Yeah, okay. It was more the first try after a decade of break time again, whether we are still able to do stuff on the computer. So we haven't even thought very far, and so the NTSC wasn't even the plan. So, but in contrast to the time when MetaDust had been developed, times have changed. We now have social media. We posted pictures of Sam's Journey, and people were able to react on that. And the world has, gotten way smaller, and there were reactions from not just the PAL zone, but also the NTSC zone. Mostly in the vein of, will it be NTSC 2? Will there be an NTSC version? Please don't forget the NTSC version. And I've heard these 4 letters, so often that I had a discussion with my colleague. Oh, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Problem is, if you make a game that's perfectly well working on both machines, you have to plan it in advance. Sam's Journey was quite far in terms of progress, and the decision to add NTSC support came quite late. Oh, okay. And the problem is, when you start out with a PAL machine, the technical stuff is as it is. You have a machine that's a bit slower, but this is not really interesting. The more interesting thing is you have far more time to draw your frame than on an NTSC machine. And if you plan a platformer in the vein of the NES and Super Nintendo and Genesis platformers, then you need all your system resources. And we planned the game to fully use the PAL hardware. Making this NTSC compatible afterwards would have been either a big sacrifice on features, or we did it kind of the dirty way, let's say. You don't need a RAM expansion. That's a common misunderstanding. The RAM expansion unit, what is it called in English? If you REU?
Yeah,
do you call it the
REU? Yeah, the REU.
REU. Okay, the REU is not just a RAM expansion, it's also a fast byte copier. It can transfer memory quite fast. And you don't even have to have RAM in your REU. I just exploit this little piece of hardware to... this is an original.
Yeah.
This is actually quite big.
Oh yeah, God, the thing's massive. It's huge. You gotta the thing's hanging off the desk halfway because you gotta work this thing behind it.
I guess so. And it's big in size, not necessarily in capacity, I think.
It's 512K. But I mean, the 64K version was the same, or 128, or whatever the other one was. They're all the same size. So
does it have its own power supply unit?
No. You have to get an upgraded, a larger
a high-pod
version.
one.
Yeah, for the 64.
Okay. Yeah. So you have an original REO. This is interesting. Have you played Sam's Journey?
I have.
Because you have this very toy.
Yes.
That's the thing. That's the point I was making all the time on Facebook. I'm like, every serious C64 collector has a ROI somewhere.
Yeah.
Or an REU.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you even complaining?
Right.
I mean, you have GEOS RAM, you have CMD REU, which is the one I have, which is exactly made from the same parts like the original one,
right.
because they spared Commodore parts. You have the original Commodore. You got
the Geo RAM, which costs like $25 online now. I mean, you can get all this stuff. It's not. Yeah. It's not
Berkeley
difficult
software,
to come across.
And there were German copies from Rex. Rex Electronics.
Right.
So you have tons of different variants, and Sam's Journey is supporting them. It's not like you need this very special version of the RAM expansion unit. It's not a problem.
Right.
So I don't know why people are even complaining. It's not like it's a rare item that you hardly can get anywhere.
Yeah.
To be honest, I haven't even expected people to have a real REU. At that time, when I made the decision to use the REU to mitigate the frame drops, I was more thinking about things like the 1541 Ultimate. Because I knew many people nowadays have disk drive replacement solutions, and nearly every hardware expansion nowadays has a REU emulation on board. Yep. So I was thinking, when people have replaced the real drive by a Ultimate, then they have an REU. So then they are ready to play Sam's Journey. That was my original idea.
Yeah, and a lot of people, as Joerg has said to me, who doesn't have he's like, who doesn't have a C64 or 1541 Ultimate? Well, I don't, but but most people do at this point, because it's a lot more convenient than messing around with actual discs and all this stuff. But like you said, an REU is built into almost everything you get now.
Yeah, so they are not rare to come by.
No.
You can get them from all different kind of flavors. You can get them built in the 1541 Ultimate, and I'm the only one using it for tape, actually, because of preserving tapes. That's why I'm using it, because it has a tape adapter you can buy for. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm the kind of guy who is transferring disk using a network, the RRNet. I like that a bit more. So anyway, so and I think for some reason, hopefully we had a part in making NTSC more popular, because I remember when we were starting with Scene World in the year 2000, people were saying, "Why are you even caring about Americans? That is dead. It's dead. It's dead."
There's still
that market,
6 or 7 of us left.
Yeah, and going on this ground, it must have been surprising for you, Chester, that there were hundreds of Sam Journey orders on the first day or something.
Well, when the American market was really dead, then I had a lot of zombies on my social media accounts lately, because I mean, we have published sneak peek trailer videos of Sam's Journey over the last month, and it's not just the European guys watching it. Everyone watched these, and yes, day one, not even at the day of the release. We have opened the option for pre-order, I think in October, so 2 months earlier. People could already pay for the unfinished game which was a bold move, I know, but we had the general interest in the game was so high that we had really problems producing that high number of units. So in a way, we asked the audience to help us with funding the production, and they did help us via pre-ordering, and there were quite some NTSC guys there too. But it's interesting. You can post about the REU requirement often and again, but not everybody catches this bit of information. You have to repeat this information over and over again, so that there isn't anyone suddenly disappointed because, it needs a REU. Interestingly, the NTSC guys may be the ones who, again, complain about this is not the C64 if it requires a REU. Where the PAL guys this time, there is nothing to bash about. It's running on a stock machine from 82 and everything is good. But, well, many NTSC customers I know about opted for the download, of course, because shipping a physical unit, I'm sure they would have liked a physical unit, but Provision does not have a distribution partner over at the USA, so it's a lot of shipping costs involved.
Well, but you can still get one physical NTSC release on disc, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, there is. You can order the physical release on disc, of course. But it's, again, the price is in euro. You have to add exchange rates. You have to add, income, not income. What is it? The taxes and the shipping costs. And an Australian guy said, I would have liked the box, but it has to get here anyhow. Yeah. And yeah.
Never stopped me in the past.
I did get the digital download. I intend to go back and actually get the box, but I have no patience to wait for shipping. So I got the digital download now so that I could play instantly. And then
wow! So you're actually paying twice. Oh my god!
There's my digital download.
Well, wow, this is. But you know that you would have got access to the downloads ordering a physical box, do you?
Yes.
But I take it as an additional support and say thank you very much for that.
Exactly.
No, yes. I know of some guys who actually ordered the physical box and now are still waiting for it. But because we have, as I said, a huge number of units to actually manufacture and then ship, and not even the Germans are in the advantage of getting it first, because as far as I know, the orders are being processed in the order as they were placed in the shop after the game. I don't know, but it's quite randomly.
Yeah.
I know about some US guys who actually have the package, and I have a friend in Frankfurt, Germany, who still hasn't. So it's kind of fair. And I know of some people in Germany who are still waiting for the package who up to this time still had this discipline to not try the download because they don't want to spoil the game. They really want to play it from real media and are still waiting, trying to get away from the media channels to not.
And then the disc is broken. And then the disc is broken.
Well, this is the worst case scenario, I think. But then again, you could opt for the download and problem solved.
Right.
Well, as I learned from the recent years buying cartridge games, you even can't be sure that the cartridge is arriving and working. I got one a while ago, a new game, and the cartridge IC was just broken. Didn't boot up. So.
Yeah, well, this is a problem that we have manufacturing the cartridges. The pieces are ordered at a. Everything is automated. There's a big factory. They are programmed and they spit out these cartridges. All the parts are being automatically, shot onto the board. And there is a certain rate of failure. And usually, if you purchase an iPhone, then you don't get the board directly from the factory. It undergoes tests and stuff. Yeah, and the boards we have are raw from the factory. We do test them, but we can't really, make 100% sure.
Right.
And this might slip one through. This pretends to be working, but isn't.
Yeah, and I'd assume this would go for the discs too, because when you're talking about floppies, a lot of this stuff is 25, 30 years old. That I don't know if they make these anymore. So you're still working with. They might be new, sealed in a box somewhere, but you're still using fairly old stock, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I think the last factory actually making these discs has just closed. I think. And, I'm really astounded that people like Trollovision or Cytronic actually have this large number of discs on stock. The time will come where you have sent in discs to get new original games, I think.
Yeah.
To get them back with...
and it's kind of reverting back to how things used to be, because it used to be that you'd have to send in discs because they were expensive.
Yeah.
We're reverting back to our earlier states.
Well, I have still 1,000 in my cupboard for bad times. So
yeah,
you mean blank ones?
Blank ones
for the lean times for the future when he'll be the only one left.
So let's talk a bit. Did Sam's Journey turn out the way you wanted it to be? Did it turn out better? I mean, a lot of people saying it's the best game in centuries, and it's a real breaker of limits. It's even better than Mayhem in Monsterland, which was before the top notch of jump and runs.
Actually, after people said all this stuff, it's hard for me to say, yes, the game is exactly as we intended it to be. But it actually is. When we planned this game, we were big fans of these kind of games. We were C64 fans, but playing platform games was always a thing. You had to go to different machines, because what did we have on the C64? We had popular in Europe were the Giant Sisters, Mayhem in Monsterland. In the NTC zone, you have the CJ series, I think. CJ the Elephant, was it? And there have been Navi the Aardvark. We had New Zealand Story. But, I mean, we are talking about a machine with decades of lifetime and thousands of games. But good platformers actually weren't that often.
That's true, actually.
I agree. 64 platformer games on the C64 are one of its weakest fields, I feel like. I've never really... A lot of them I haven't felt comfortable playing. I don't know if it's because of the joystick or what, but...
That's a good point. Did you enjoy playing Sam's Journey more, AJ?
I did.
Despite the joystick?
Despite the joystick. Because it's... A lot of platformers on the 64, when you're coming off of, like, I never gamed much on the machine. I did most of my gaming on an NES or something where you've got a gamepad. And so coming to this and then using a joystick to play a platformer feels counterintuitive a lot of times. And I didn't feel that way with Sam's Journey. I actually, it felt fluent, and it worked with the joystick, as opposed to a lot of them I've played where it just kind of feels awkward. If that makes
Going
sense.
up to jump.
I'm glad to hear that. I was genuinely surprised about complaining many people about having to push up for jump, because I haven't been aware. Well, I have played on video game consoles at the same time or the same amount of time as on home computers. So I'm kind of a stick and a controller guy. But platformers, as I said. I've always played platformers on the NES, and Super Mario Brothers 3 is what I would call my most favorite classic platformers of all times, if you ask me. And the Stefan Gutsch, my graphician, he's had always been a big fan of Kirby, the Kirby character, and Kirby's, what is it? Kirby
Dreamland.
Dreamland, right.
Yeah.
And it was his idea, actually, that he wanted a hero that changes appearance completely. When I said, "Wow, are you really sure you want that? I mean, you have to animate the character in all his different costumes." And he said, "Yeah, no problem." I said, "Okay." And the Donkey Kong Country series on the Super Nintendo was one of my favorite series as well. And when we were brainstorming stuff, there hasn't been any C64 game amongst those where we drew inspiration from, because there haven't been any. We have taken our inspiration and also the kind of controls. Well, if AJ, if you say you played a lot on the NES, then you might have recognized a lot of gameplay feature and the way it controls in Sam's Journey. And it was quite a journey to adapt an original gamepad controls to the stick. And I know that all these people who complained about pushing up for jump, well, in the very first level, the button doesn't even have a function. So the question is, it's a good question. Why not the button? But if you dig deeper into the game and you discover all his abilities, then you might come to the conclusion, okay, that's what the button is for.
Right. Yeah, it did feel a lot more fluent than a lot of the other games that I've played, and the responsiveness and whatnot felt closer to the platformers I've played on NES or whatever, as opposed to the 64. The 64, there's lots of good tries, but a lot of them don't really quite, they don't meet up the expectations. The other thing I really liked about this that I noticed was that, again, another big cardinal sin that a lot of C64 games do is they respawn enemies constantly. And with this one, you kill a guy, he stays killed. You don't have to worry about, 500 new enemies coming at you from the side of the screen. If you kill this guy, there's no one else coming and is going to kill you 2 minutes later.
Yeah. But this is a thing. Sam's Journey is a game where you can go back in the levels to discover stuff that you haven't picked up the first time, and it would have been quite annoying if you have to kill the enemies over and over again. Also, killing the enemies is part of the puzzle, actually, to reach some items, right. And it just wouldn't work if they would respawn over again. But one thing you have to admit, the C64 has a quite limited amount of memory, and if you have many objects in a scene, you actually have to store the information whether this enemy has been killed or not. So you have to find a way to actually implement that. In games like Giant Sisters or Super Mario Brothers 1, where you're only running in one direction, it just doesn't matter, of course. Right. As soon as you can go backwards, you have to make the game designer decision. Respawn, yes or no. Mm-hmm. We chose the exploration thing. You don't have to, but you can go back and investigate every single corner of the levels. And if you get to a place where there's no enemy, then you can conclude, hey, I have been here before.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's another nice thing.
Yeah.
Interestingly, talking about design and so on, I was surprised about your choice for a composer, for a musician. Alexander Ney is not really known to make a nice, cute game music. He's more the techno, funk, techno, funk, electronic music kind of guy.
Yeah, this is interesting. People who know Alex Nye have come to exactly this conclusion. Well, he was doing C64 music and technically good music. And when I was on the lookout for a composer, yes, my colleague put in some names and I put in some names. And all the composers we had asked first rejected. Because, I told him, it's a big project. I need almost 20 tunes. And then many have said,
okay.
And then it was Alex Ney. But the music you were referring to, the music style, this is actually the style of his real music project. With the real, I mean, not chip music, but real music. So, and this dark style you're referring to, this is his real music style. When on chip, he's quite versatile, actually. He calls himself a multi-style musician. And I said, you call yourself a multi-style composer? So I have here 14 different graphical settings, and I would like to have all of them spread a different atmosphere, mood, and we made a test. I sent him screenshots of the 14 different settings, outdoor settings, green hills, birds, everything fine, funny, colorful, and then caves with narrow passages, dark, then an ice cave with sparkling crystals everywhere. And I asked him whether he could capture this atmosphere. And, he said, that's a challenge, and I take it.
Nice.
And this is basically the story. And people who know just Taksim are astounded, yes, that he can also do, happy music.
So I guess he will become one of the most booked game musicians soon.
Maybe. But not all musics are happy, that I have to add. And I didn't want that because I don't want just happy music in a platformer. For me, music is always a means to emphasize the atmosphere that is already there. And the music doesn't, it has to, emphasize is the right word. And he did this very good. The other challenge was he never made music that had to be compatible to sound effects. Yeah. A jump and run, a platformer is a genre where you have to hear what happens. You have to hear your jump. You have to hear when you land on the ground again. And so a platformer without sound effects wouldn't work at all. For me, it wouldn't work at all. And on the C64, you have two options. You have the option to say the melody music may only use 2 voice channels, so that the third channel is always free for sound effects. That's one option. That's a cheap option, actually. And then there's the option where you say you use all 3 channels, but every time I need sound effects, I kind of steal him a voice for a short time to play the sound effect instead. And we had some time spending making the music this way that you don't even notice.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I told him, hey, the one voice, please design the one voice in a way that the tones are short and repeatedly triggered, so that if I steal you this one, it comes back quickly. So
it's interesting because a lot of reviews and said surprisingly this game doesn't steal a voice. And the first thing I noticed when I was playing that journey is I was expecting a voice to miss. So I was like, oh yes, so now the voice is switched off from the music. So I got it. And we did interview composers in the past. For example, there are even games that use 2 channels for sound effects. For example, Turtles, the coin up, uses 2 sound effects because you have your own attack sounds and the counter-attack sounds of the enemies playing at the same time. And the other one would be RoboCop 3. Because in the first level, you have a crosshair level and you have to shoot the enemies. And there are 2. You have 2 channels for sound effects. So Jeroen, for example, was doing that a lot. Doing music with 1 channel, multiplexing the instruments so fast that you wouldn't recognize that it's just 1 voice. And the most famous composer actually musing a voice was Dave Lowe, who is doing that for a lot of games like Double Dragon 2, Power Drift. So just so people can compare it to Sam's Journey. So I have to say Sam's Journey is doing this a lot better than other games. That if you don't know what you have to listen for, you probably don't recognize that the lead voice is missing.
Right.
But I'm bad. I'm hearing that stuff. I'm sorry. and when I was watching some reviews, I was like, no, sir, you're wrong. I'm sorry, but the voice is switched off. You just didn't hear it.
Yeah, well, it's perfectly good that there are people hearing it because we had to check for this if it's distracting or just blending in, you know. And there's one song in the game where this doesn't work actually, and this is the title music. But this was my fault because I kind of ordered the title music and I just forgot that I would have sound effects in the title music. So Taksim said to me, "Ha, you didn't say that." And I said, "Okay." And and there you can see. You have to put work into it, and if you don't do it, it's at the first note hearable, you know.
Right.
But you know Hawkeye? You didn't mention Hawkeye. Hawkeye is another interesting tune who has just 1 voice music by Jeroen, by the way.
Yeah. He's the master of multiplexing. It's just crazy. Oh, by the way, it's not the only one coming back to music. Ice Guys was also the first game I've heard playing digits on a 8580 SID.
Yes, that was an invention that a friend of mine and I. We were fans of the old musics by people like Chris Hülsbeck or Jeroen Tel, who were using the 4th voice for amazing stuff. And as we all know, Commodore fixed an error, and no one would say they fixed an error. Everyone said they destroyed the sound. But actually, the mechanics that were used to actually generate this 4th voice, no one would do it that way today. There are ways to play sampled voices on the new SID, and they even sound better. But before these new mechanics were even known, Ice Guys used a very, an interesting way, but it worked. The samples just had a resolution of 2 bits, interestingly. So the samples weren't very good, but they were always better, a real snare drum, a real bass drum, and I think there was some voice samples, like 1, 2, 3, and
yes, exactly. 1, 2, 3, go! Yes, I played that the whole day when I got Ice Guys and loaded it the first time. I was playing it for 3 hours because I couldn't accept that my C64C can play digits. Well, I couldn't accept that, you know. I mean, I was 16. I was crazy as a child would be at this point. I was like, oh my God, what is wrong with this machine, you know?
I'm trying to imagine that now. You jumping in front of your machine.
Yeah.
It's actually we even had distorted guitars that, by the way, haven't been distorted at all in the original sample. They got all the distortion by our crappy sample resolution that we had. But yeah.
It was still great for me. It's still sounding great nowadays. So.
But you have to. The thing is, the Ice Guys doesn't have a fourth voice because we abused one of the three regular voices to make it a sample voice. So it's actually 2 SID plus 1 sample. But yeah.
You did it smart enough. I didn't notice it back in the day. You see? So you did invent a lot of stuff on the C64 that people in the other interviews even didn't mention because they were all focusing on Sam's journey. You know?
Yeah, this is right, yeah.
So when you asked me before, so what do you want to focus on in the interview? I said everything. Right.
Yeah, well, I haven't prepared for anything, so I'm basically prepared for anything. This is a great thing.
Nice. So is there anything left to be the first in? Can you go any further, or is Sam's journey like the maximum that can be done nowadays? Or do you have other crazy ideas for the next project?
Well, you can't say that this is everything that can be done because it's so much depending on the style of game. You know, Sam's Journey is a platform game, and I think it has, for a platform game, very many features on the C64. I mean, the platform games on video game consoles were our inspiration. And as AJ said too, there haven't been many C64 platformers with these many features on the C64. And I think concerning platformers, Sam's Journey is quite a high profile thingy. And I'm saying that now, but let's wait some years and someone will put something on top of that. But if you leave the platform genre, then I think the limit of what can be achieved has not been achieved yet, because there are always things, discoveries, not necessarily new discoveries or new inventions, but the knowledge of the machine has developed so far, and using the internet, we are collecting all the knowledge and concentrating it in knowledge databases, so everyone can look into the knowledge databases and learn stuff that he didn't know. Even 13 years of C64 programming, he didn't know that one. And I mean, assembling all this knowledge, you can draw ideas from having this knowledge all together. You can say, hey, I combine this and this and this to a cool idea to implement a feature for a game. So I think, no, the limit has not been reached yet. It has never been reached on the C64, actually.
Wow. Well, both Kretzinger and I are still waiting for Test Drive 3.
There you go. There's the next project.
See, that's just me. I like erasers. That's just me.
That's another one. That's another one that the 64 I don't feel really got the hang of. Was like the test drive type of games, because again you're using a joystick, and it feels wrong to be driving a car with a joystick.
Well, I have a flight.
So did I. But they're not. But they're digital, not analog. So it's not a matter of like you turn the wheel and then you turn slightly left. No, you turn the wheel and it's like in a real car you're going all the way around. So there's no subtlety to it at all. It's just left or right or straight. That's what you're doing.
But there was one game that actually supported an analog joystick on the C64 that was Refs.
It was what?
Refs. REVS.
Revs.
That's Revs, yeah.
Yeah, well, this was
By-
kind of a Formula One simulation.
Formula
But-
3 simulation. Formula
Okay.
3. Yeah.
But
And-
more
and
a simulation than a racer.
Yeah, exactly. And the original version, not the plus one, the original version only worked with keyboard or analog joystick.
Okay. But where do you get an analog joystick for this thing?
Well, there were two joysticks being released.
Two.
Two for the C64. One for Flight 2, actually originally on the Atari, and one by I forgot the name. Kings something. I have to look at it. But there were two joysticks, analog joysticks made for the C64.
Okay.
So that's even rarer than the Super
Yeah,
CPU.
right.
Yeah.
Well, you could have used pedals instead, no?
Yes, the Plus version added a patch for pedals instead, right? And the digital joystick was supported too, suddenly. Because they figured nobody had an joystick and people hated the keyboard, yeah. So.
Well, yeah, but to to pick up AJ's point, I mean, even an analog stick is not really that realistic for driving a car. Or pedals. Pedals, maybe pedals even more, because they could actually be turned fast and slow.
Yeah, it's weird feeling.
Pedal is also something a lot of people have.
Yeah.
But so you've played games on the NES, also the Super Nintendo? Then you know Super Mario Kart, of course.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. Who doesn't know? And a friend of mine and we have discussed racing games for some time, because he would love to see a racing game on the C64, but not necessarily because he would like to make one, but he would just like to see one. Right. Because just like good platformers, there is a lack of good racing games. I mean,
Yeah.
There's a lack of games like Super Mario Kart on this. You can find
There's
stuff
not one game that is like that on the C64.
Right. I mean, you can get stuff like Pit Stop 2, where you're both going in one direction, but not something where you're kind of battling. Yeah. You know.
Here we go. We made Chester's new game, Super Mario Kart on the C64, and with an option to look from the cockpit like on Test Drive.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Here, all the wishes combined. Mine, AJ's, your friends, all of us are happy.
So this record is going through the cut, right? Well, this recording is it's the question is, when you think about races, whether you make it a realistic racer like Test Drive 2, or whether you make it a cartoon thing like Super Mario Kart, or I think these are the both ends of the story. Realistic. I don't know, Grand Prix circuit. We had Grand Prix circuit 2, which was kind of a test drive in a racing suit.
Exactly.
And I don't know what did we have? What else do we have? I don't know.
Cycles,
Power Drift, of course, but.
Cycles, which was the same engine like Circuit.
But with motorcycles, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly. On Super Hang-On would be another candidate, I think.
Yeah.
From these, and we had games like Power Drift, but those didn't put the focus on realism.
Stunt Car Racer was also one.
Stunt Car Racer was a good one. I like that one.
Okay, Stunt Car Racer, okay, yeah.
Polygon Racer, yeah.
Yeah, but the good racer still needs to be done. But if someone would ask me what kind of racer I would like to play on the C64, I think it would not be the realistic racer. I think it would be more the party fun racer. You know,
Make an option. Do you want the realistic?
Well, and that's sort of also how. As like I was saying, using a joystick or something to drive a car feels wrong. In Super Mario Kart, it didn't feel as wrong to use a gamepad for that, because it was a cartoon. It's not like you're not expecting real world physics and using a wheel and all that stuff to drive this stupid cart that, that Bowser's sitting on or something.
Nice.
Yeah, of course. Or
It's
launching
funny.
bananas or red turtles on the.
Right, exactly. You can your mind can allow that conceit a little bit more than test drive, where you're looking at the cockpit of a car and you're using a joystick to steer. It's just
Yeah.
it feels like you're going back to 1905 when your car had a rudder to control.
Yeah, right. So that would be what I was asking for a racer. Or the other thing would be, but it would also be the arcade style. There was a game called Destruction Derby. This was a game for MS-DOS.
Yes.
This was kind of it kind of was some sort of Super Mario Kart battle mode, but in an arena with up to 8 cars, I think. And you don't steal yourself. You don't steal balloons. Were the balloons? The 3 balloons at Super Mario Kart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but in Destruction Derby, it was kind of funny because you could see how the cars were damaged. Meaning you you run into the others and the mirrors go off and the doors open or fall off. And the cars get really damaged. And when your car is not able to drive anymore, you're out. And then it was last man standing, and this was kind of fun. Yeah. But realism, I think, would be more the one-player game, whereas the arcade style would be the multiplayer party game, I think.
Anyway, I mean, we had once a live show about the RRNet Racer, so technically it's possible nowadays to make internet games with the C64. It has been done before.
Then we are back to hardware requirements, huh?
Yeah, a lot of people have these Wi-Fi modems now. It's easy enough to kind of telnet to someone.
Yeah.
I got 4 of them.
AJ, your secret supplier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Our own Nick Vivid sells one at www.
Yeah, we have a lot of resources in our team at Scene World. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Right. So, and we shouldn't forget, by the way, there are still a lot of games discovered. For example, games that weren't, So, who knows? Yeah? That's also something you could work on to completing an incomplete game. But I guess you are more the guy who wants to make something from scratch.
Completing someone else's incomplete game is not the most fun.
No, it's not. I'm also more the guy for original new games. There are people who actually made it their mission to port popular games from the iOS platform or the Android platform to the C64 in a legal way, by the way, asking the original property owners, intellectual property owners and stuff. And this is called the demake scene. And there are some very good demakers, actually. But the challenge, I think, is not to create a game, but to make a game possible on the C64 that has been published somewhere else.
GTA.
That's I think is.
I think that's pushing it a little bit.
And if people would ask me if I would, as you said, port GTA or finish other people games, then I would say no. I have own ideas, and I'm more the guy that tries to, invent and implement own ideas. So that wouldn't be my job.
Okay.
But nevertheless, the Frank Gasking, I think, the maintainer of the games that weren't portal, over the last months, there has always been the joke if Sam's Journey is an April Fool's joke or not. And many people haven't believed for a very long time, actually, whether the game is real. Because not everyone could attend the Gamescom exhibition in Cologne, Germany. because especially the NTSC guys didn't hop over to just to see if it's real. They had to believe, they had to keep the faith. And yeah, the common joke was, is Sim's Journey being made for Frank Gasking's collection exclusively or not?
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that one. Okay. It's the same.
I always said, no, we are planning to release this game. Sorry, Frank.
But it's the same with Metal Dust. People were also saying that's never coming out, and it did. So.
Yeah, so I don't know whether it's a good sign that people always think my game will end up at Frank's, but.
But it's good to know that you are already in mind working on the next game.
Yes, I am. Although it's not easy to decide on a project actually, because Sam's Journey has been with us, the development team, for some months now, years even, and we are not just planning C64 games. So to be honest, I didn't have the intention to make another C64 games after Sam's Journey. We planned to make this platformer for the C64 because it's the machine where we all started with, and it would have been the fulfillment of a dream to make a console-style platformer for the C64. But
Game Boy release.
Pardon me?
Game Boy release.
Yeah, I don't know. We aren't the shades of grey types of guy, you know.
Only screen.
No,
it was screen,
Go
not
with the
black
Game
and
Boy Advance, you have some color.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but actually, if you ask me about game consoles, I would even think of porting Sam to consoles like the NES or the Super Nintendo.
Yes, you hinted this a lot of times, actually, the NES.
Yeah, I have, in this maybe interesting point, because I have the development of NES games in mind for a very long time now, I have provided myself with the necessary testing hardware. I have the NTSC versions of both the NES and the SNES already here. Wasn't always easy because there are things like the customs who ask me a lot of questions about.
Oh, ask me about that. Ask me about that.
Yeah, but if I decide to, or after this experience, I would start with NTSC first and then make the PAL port. This is maybe a nice thing to hear for the folk over there, overseas, because it's the direction is more easy this way, of course. And I think the communities for the NES and the SNES are actually larger in the US than they are here in Europe, and the homebrew scene is very vivid and active there, from what I read and see. And yeah, well, this is I should start NTSC. I should do NTSC first, you know.
Wow.
And thinking of another C64 game, the success of Sam's Journey, and it has been a success. It has been even a surprising success because, we knew the game is going to be good, but we didn't know, or we haven't even expected this great interest in this game. So this is why my distribution partner, I'm always joking about Jacob at Prodovision, who has at this time, I don't know, several hundred empty boxes in his in his room. They are stacked under the ceiling, you know, up to every free slot in his house is currently filled with Sam's Journey related stuff. And there is not even the boxes. There's also the stuff in the boxes, you know. There are gimmicks. There is the printed manual and stuff. And all this, I mean, his wife was very annoyed. Because, and this stuff has to be shipped out so that things are good again. And taking this success into account may make us reconsider the decision not making another C64 game. But it will not be a direct successor, I can promise, because it may we may need a break of platformers.
Yeah.
Okay. I see. Yeah, it's just well, if you make another kicker on the C64, poor Jacob for shipping it out again.
Someone's got to do the dirty work.
Well, I mean, recently we have a lot of surprising successes. See, for example, Planet X2 by the 8-Bit guys, who is the first game that is a real-time strategy game. That's also something people said it's impossible on the C64, and he made it possible. So 2017 has been the year where a lot of games were released seen impossible before.
It has been a big year for game production on the 64 in general, I feel like. There's just been a lot of stuff that's come out and has done really, has come out successfully that you haven't seen in a long time. And I think it's just a lot of the tools are now there where in the past you'd have to write a game, get it published, and then you'd have to, invest in all these, in all the printed units and all that stuff. But now you can pretty much make them to order. So it's not an issue where you have to invest all this money before you can do anything else. You can have the game and sell it and, again, build them to order and send them out. And there's not as much of a risk and there's more benefit to the creators.
Right, and you can even reduce risk using things like crowdfunding, for example.
Yeah, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right. And this is actually a good thing. You said I had many breaks in my game development. This is not quite true. I had many breaks in my C64 game development, actually. Because, of course, my team and I, we were making games, app games for feature phones for some years. And but the interesting thing is the iPhone and the Android opened the market for masses of developers appeared on stage. Everything is doing the same stuff. We have 10,000 flashlight apps. We have thousands of Angry Birds and Flappy Birds clones. And, the prices for apps dropped down to the basement and below. You can't even make money anymore if you don't provide the next big thing. Because there are so many people who can, assemble an app with tools. Actually, you don't even have to learn something. You can just assemble them point and click, and it's just too much. You can't stand out with your stuff anymore, and that's why we stopped making games for cell phone games, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, I recognized this growing general interest in retro gaming, or what we call retro gaming. It's not really retro gaming what we are doing. I think the term is quite misleading. I mean, we aren't playing the old games. We are longing for new games. They are just running on old hardware. That's the retro aspect in it. But we still love the machine, but we wouldn't want to not get new stuff for it, I think.
Right. This is what I've been saying. I don't like the whole idea of retro gaming because a game is a good game, dependent on the game. It doesn't matter what platform it runs on. Super Mario Brothers 3 is a good game, and the fact that it's on an NES is irrelevant. It's just a good game. It
is. And it will always be.
Right. And I think there's a lot of misconception that a lot of people think that, you need the most powerful machines with the greatest graphics capability and all that stuff to have a good game. And that's where things kind of went for a while. And now people are starting to realize that doesn't really necessarily make a good game. A good game is a game that is playable. It doesn't matter what the graphics are. It doesn't matter what platform it runs on. It's just the game itself.
Just as Jester mentioned, Donkey Kong Country, people were really surprised that it actually worked despite the very limitations, on the Game Boy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was first released on the Super Nintendo and released on the Game Boy afterwards. And it's surprising for many people that it's actually being as fun as on the Super NES. Yeah. So you see, it's not about the platform. It's about the game.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure SM's Journey would be good on a Game Boy just because it's a good game, you know? Even if it had less colors, it would still be a fun game, you know?
Yeah, that's what some people actually told us in comments, that it's not just a good C64 game, but it's a good game. This is actually a very nice compliment to hear because, we are not making C64 games. We are making games. The C64 is just what is it? It's the connecting thing between us and the players in a way. The C64 community is using this machine. Other communities use other machines, and it's just the thing how we reach our players. There aren't so many players. There are two kind of players. One kind of players have all available hardware in their house. I mean, they don't really care if Nintendo or Sega or NEC, PC Engine stuff or whatever. They have everything. And if there is a game, they have to look, what machine do I need? Okay. Right. And here we go. And then there are the platform fans who just say, I'm a C64 fan. I'm interested in everything that's C64. And if there is a good game for Nintendo, then I say, people, please make a port.
So, hearing you saying that means the next thing will be an NES game.
Or you can just jump to conclusions.
No. Even if I wanted to, it has not been decided. But an NES game is an option. Yes, I have already the hardware here, and when I was actually playing NES games back then, I've always wanted to make one myself. But back at that time, it just haven't been possible because home computers were the only open platform. All consoles were strictly closed. Restricted to developers only, and you have to, I don't know, to get a Nintendo developer license, you have to fulfill a huge list of requirements that, a young guy, hobbyist, would never be able to fulfill. So I just waited 20 years, so I can get back to the NES and make a game.
Actually interesting because Strominal released his Game Boy album on a Game Boy cartridge, and he actually got the permission and the license from Nintendo to do it. They are pretty much open for that nowadays. If you ask the right people. Yeah.
Okay, this I did not know that actually. So that means his Game Boy music album has got a Nintendo quality seal on it?
No, that not. He had to write in the manual, it's not an official Nintendo product, but he asks them if he is allowed to, and they said yes.
All right.
Yeah.
That's basically bypassing the copy protection and region code protection that you have to do if you want to run own software on the devices. And
but with permission of Nintendo. That's the difference.
This is interesting.
So I don't know how they feel about NES games compared to Game Boy music album, but I found it interesting that they would say, yes, Terminal, you are allowed to do it,
I'm sure at this point they wouldn't mind too much because it's not like they produce the system anymore, and all it does is give them good publicity to see new games coming out for something that they made years ago.
I'm not very sure if I would agree on that because they just released the NES Mini, and so they are pretty much aware of the nostalgic factor of this thing. And there was this thing called Virtual Console, I think, in the Wii store, where you could buy classics.
Right, and but nothing where you can just plug a cartridge into it. It's just right,
of course. But I think the what are they? The patents have expired concerning the NES. So you can today reconstruct and re-engineer these chips without breaking any laws. This helps. I think it's 1 or 2 years to go for the Super Nintendo for the patents to expire there too. But well, I'm with you that Nintendo doesn't really care anymore about that. Except if you sell 50,000 units, then they may have another look.
Yeah. Terminal made a limit of 50, so it was a small batch.
So he wasn't much of a threat, yeah.
Well, it was keen of him to ask, and he told me no, I didn't want it to do it behind the backs of Nintendo.
Right.
Is this interesting, yeah.
I'm one of the few people who have it.
I would like to ask AJ, because he is actually an NTSC player. And do you have also a PAL machine?
I do not.
Available? You do not.
No.
But are you aware of the difference in gaming speeds that...
I'm aware that there is a difference in gaming speeds. Having not played the PAL version, it doesn't seem fast to me. So it's not like I'm like, damn, this is way too fast. It's.
So when you were playing Sam's Journey, it was an okay speed for you.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting because when I even have an NTSC 64 here to test my game, and when I tested the NTSC version of Sam's Journey, I was, this is really, really interesting. But on the other hand, after testing the NTSC version for a while, going back to the PAL version was kind of a, what the hell?
Go faster!
Yes, I think you really get used to anything. It's just a question of time.
Right. Yeah. The biggest change that I see between a lot of PAL and NTSC games, because I've played games that are PAL games, and I've played them on the NTSC. I'd never realized, being a kid, that they were actually supposed to go slower than that. But the one thing that I always did notice was that anything that's a circle on the screen is always elongated because we've got the stupid pixels. The pixels are the wrong size in NTSC land. So everything is, the aspect ratio isn't quite right. I noticed that sort of thing more than I noticed any speed difference. And music, of course. When I hear the PAL version, I'm like, come on, pick it up.
But how can you say the NTSC pixels are the wrong ones? Because the machine has been invented in the NTSC land, and so they are the right pixels, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I suppose. Most of the games, though, when you see the graphics, they're wrong. They're shaped oddly. Everything's a little oblong because a lot of times most of the time it's it's drawn on a PAL machine. So the fact that when I actually do graphics now, I put it in what is that? Like the widescreen, because that fixes the aspect ratio a bit.
Yeah.
because I'm cognizant of the fact that if I do graphics on the thing, most of the people that are going to be looking at it are probably PAL, and I don't want my graphics to look bizarre to them.
So you drawn them the PAL style.
Yes.
Yeah, I see.
Well, that and the fact that I did some graphics on an emulator, and they looked really good, and then I put them on my actual machine, and I'm like, whoa, what the hell happened? And I realized that because I'm using the emulator in PAL mode, and my machine is NTSC, so I'm like, no, that's not. I have to fix that because now it looks totally wrong, and I can't function with that anymore. So.
But did you fix the music playing routine for NTSC?
What kind of question is that? Of course I did. The music.
Okay.
I even fixed the pitch table so that the notes are at the same frequency.
And that is what most people don't.
Yeah.
And that is why the NTSC version of Turbo Outrun sounds so awful.
It does? I don't know it.
It sounds so awful. Shake the Street, which is the Course 1 music by Jerontel. It sounds so awful on the NTSC fixed version because the pitch isn't fixed, but the speed is. The instruments are so bad. Like,
Well, the problem is, like all times, you have many options. You can recompose the music completely for the NTSC playback rate, so that it has the right real speed, or you can just call it more often or less often to make it the right speed on playback. And because many programs on home computers are synchronized to the frame rate, in Sam's Journey, I decoupled the music playback from the frame rate, so I won't even run into this problem. But this is maybe because even though Sam's Journey hasn't been planned for NTSC in the first place, I kind of know this kind of stuff from my experience with NES and Super Nintendo, where this problem has always been there. And the Scene World guys, try to bring PAL and NTSC together. This is your mission, I think. But yes. Technically, you just cannot bring them together because they are actually so far away. AJ mentioned the graphics. This is one thing. It's not just even the pixel size. We are talking about color palettes.
Never the same color, NTSC.
Yeah. There is a similar joke for PAL, which I don't know at the moment, but the NTSC PAL problem on the now retro platforms does still exist. It's not gone.
I know where it's written. It's written in Wikipedia.
Oh. It's. I think the NTSC thing is less of an issue now because a lot of video formats don't care, and a lot of games on modern platforms are independent of that.
Actually, the saying is, I'm just reading it, never twice the same color.
Oh, okay.
NTSC.
Yeah.
That's enough.
And there is a similar thing for PAL too, because, that's the way it is. My system is right, yours is wrong, Mm-hmm. But why modern games don't care is because of the vast amount of processor power. You can just simulate your world in more than 100 times a second than there's even pictures drawn on the screen. So the picture drawing is, in the meantime, you just get more pictures, but the progress in the world is actually timed by other aspects. Right. But on the home computer and on the video consoles, it's the only synchronizing thing you got. So, games like Super Mario Bros. 3, interestingly, the scrolling stutters on a PAL system. The scrolling is perfectly smooth on NTSC, but I didn't know that for a very long time. I've just on my newly bought NTSC NES, I have experienced Super Mario smoothly for the very first time. Nintendo adapted the gameplay so that it's equally fast on both systems, but you can't achieve it without sacrificing on the smoothness. So the PAL version stutters.
And that is why you didn't do the same thing with Sam's Journey.
That would have been a choice. You could just drop frames. And we tested that. And it was so awful that we dropped it immediately. The other thing would have been taking the CJ road. Many NTSC games... I know of games like CJ and New Zealand Story and Nobby the Artfuck. I mentioned them before. They use a special kind of scrolling where they update the picture only every second frame. So they aren't smooth. They are kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but update every second frame is on PAL every as a 25 pictures per second. This is very little. On NTSC, I learned it's 30 pictures. This is not as bad as the 25 on PAL. Many NTSC games solved the problem using this kind of scrolling. But in Sam's Journey, this wouldn't have worked because Sam is quite an agile character, fast, jumping high and falling fast. And this type of scrolling with every second frame would have slowed down the gameplay entirely. And this we didn't want. We didn't want to sacrifice the intended experience when making NTSC, and that's why we opted for the hardware requirement.
Interesting, and more faster fingers for the NTSC guys.
Yeah. It just benefits us when we get to tournaments because we'll naturally be faster. Just like when we were playing that racing game online, and all the NTSC guys were winning because they're going faster than the PAL.
Yeah, I was the losing one. Yeah.
There's only so fast you can go.
This is one thing. If there will be ever be things like a speed run on Sam's Journey, then you have to distinguish between PAL and NTSC when comparing your times, because as AJ said, you are actually in real time measured in seconds. You can be faster on the NTSC machine, of course.
Easier to win the game. I guess the most famous example here in Europe would be Summer Games, the intro anthem. We would always remind them too slow.
It was too slow, regardless of where you were.
Okay.
Winter games, at least you could skip it. You could hit the button, and it would go away. Summer games, that made you watch that whole stupid intro sequence. They were real proud of that running guy animation.
Yeah.
They're like, we're making everybody watch this.
And obviously, the European pigeons are even slower.
Yeah.
It's fun. Interesting thing, by the way, about Sam's Journey is you have checkpoints and you don't die and restart the level from the beginning all the time, which is why I got pretty fast despite I'm a bad player. That made me very happy. Thank you for that.
Yeah, if it makes you happy, then we did the right thing. Actually, I'm the kind of player who really hated it back then. Playing the first levels of a game 1,000 times, and the last levels maybe never, because you always have to restart the game. And limiting the lives was an idea that was to make people insert coins into a machine, And I have never understood why there have still been the concept of limited lives on the home computer. Because, I was playing Giant Sisters 2, of course, and I died in level 17, and I had to replay 17 levels just to see the 18th level, and I really hated that. That's why we got trainers. But
and this
then
is
again,
why they sold so much action replays.
Yes. Yeah. Why would you implement a limited lives concept and then implement a trainer to get around it? Why not dropping this entirely? And also the checkpoint concept brought us the option. It adds a game design option. You can make a really tricky passage in Sam's Journey, and at the front and immediately after this tricky package, we put a flag. Yeah. So we can set up a tiny little challenge within a level. And if you made it, you raise the flag and you're done. You never have to do this again. And if you have huge levels without checkpoints, you would have to replay the entire levels. This can be quite tedious too.
That's true.
And saving the whole progress on disk or on cartridge this adds up to it. I mean, Sam's Journey is not a game like Jaina where you say, hey, today I feel like playing Jaina Sisters, which always means play through. This won't happen with Sam's Journey because it's more Super Mario 3 than Super Mario 1.
This is why I always loved the freezing function of the action replay. Like, wow, now I can actually pause games and replay them later. Wow.
Super Mario 3, by the way, did not have a save option. And if I should mention a flaw of this game, that would be it.
Yeah, you need to take a break or take a nap or something. You're leaving the system on all night.
Or, you find the flutes.
Yeah. So where can people go to find out more about this and get the game and all that fun stuff?
The game has been developed by my team called Knights of Bytes, but we have the game distributed by our partner Protovision. And this is a German-based retro game publisher specialized on C64 games. And we are working with them for some time now. Ice Guys, Bomania, Metalers, etc. And they have a website with a web shop. I think www.protovision.games is the address to go. And there you will find multiple options. Getting the game in a fancy cardboard box or as a download if you can't wait.
And there's a second option. Itch.io actually has a Windows X release. If you don't want to use an emulator and figure out how a C64 works on an emulator, you can get the Itch.io version with the Windows XE. And there's even a Mac. There's even a Linux binary. You can download from there if you buy the game. So
well, I think the itch.io version is the option also for people who do not have PayPal or only PayPal. I'm not sure. There was a problem with the download version in the Protovision store for a certain part of customers. So there are two download options. Yes.
Yeah.
And one you can pay by wire, I think, and the other one accepts PayPal. And
exactly. Yes.
Always one that works for you, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty good, and maybe on the NES, as we now heard. Yeah.
We'll see. Never say never.
Yeah. Good. And I'm still waiting for my Test Drive 3. Now I know who I can push to make one. Okay, but you are more the fundraiser guy, so I would also opt for a Super Mario Kart on the C64. I'm okay with that as well. So this was a very fun interview. I hope you enjoyed it also.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Taking the time to sit with us.
So is there anything you want us to omit from the release, or can we use all the material?
Oh, let me think about. I'm not doing a racing game next.
Okay. Understood.
Just to make this clear, yeah.
Okay, great. Right.
That was nice talking to you, both of you.
Thank you.
Talking to you. Thank you for taking the time to sit
looking
with us.
Looking forward to the broadcast, or what we called it, the release of the.
Oh yes, me
recording.
too. Okay. Alrighty. So
have a nice day, evening, night, whatever.
You too. Bye.
Bye then.
And that was Chester Kollschen. You can check out Sam's Journey. It's at www.protovision.games. You can also, it's on itch.io, protovision.itch.io/Sam's-Journey. You can see other things that he's doing at knightsofbytes.games. And links to all this in the podcast description, so you can go to it easily. You know where to find us, so I'm not going to tell it to you. Until next time, see ya.